everyone, this is Sasha bringing you a video tutorial today from BP for You. And today we're going to be talking about our brushes. And so to select the brush tool, I can either hit B on my keyboard or I can come over here and I can click on the brush tool. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is we can set our brush size. And so I'm going to make my brush size right about here for this demonstration. Actually, I'll make it a little bit bigger. Then you're going to decide whether you need a hard or a soft brush. So to grab that, we're going to click on brush settings. Now we have this option here that says hardness. So right now our hardness is at 100%. That is a hard brush. Let's take that down some, right around 50%. And then let's take that down to 0%. So do you see how each brush that we used here, it looks a lot more blurry than the last one? So this one is a very hard to find circle. This one is kind of a little bit fuzzy, maybe out of focus, and this one is very soft. And so that is what the hardness does. Now when I'm painting on a layer mask to a picture, oftentimes I find myself using a soft brush because a soft brush blends. If I use a very hard brush, I'm going to get a very strong line where I have and have not painted on the effect that I am trying to paint on. So, next thing I'm going to show you, so we see here that we get our size here. Now here we get our brushes. So we're going to look at these. Now I have my basic brushes selected. These are the brushes you're going to use the most of. But we also have these other brushes that we can look at. And so we have some very artistic looking brushes. You can see here that we have got all kinds of, actually some of them are really neat. This reminds me of some nice paint, like a nice paintbrush. Here we've got something else. It reminds me of painting. These are great brushes for some kind of a design. We've got square brushes. We've got special effects brushes. This one leaves some little circly things behind. We've got a butterfly brush. We can add butterflies to our picture. All kinds of different fun things. Drop shadow, calligraphy brushes. We've got some dry brushes. Okay, so we've got all kinds of different options for brushes. So I'm going to put those back on my default or my basic. You can also load brushes. So let's say you go to a designer such as BP for You and you buy a set of brushes from them. So we're going to go ahead here and we're going to click on Load Brushes. I have some saved in my downloads box from where I downloaded them. So I can come down here and at the bottom here I can see my new brushes that I have. And now they are loaded into my Photoshop elements here. And so I can add these really cool effects now using these new brushes that I just added into my elements folder, my brush folder. So I'm going to go ahead and put those back onto my basic brushes. Okay, so now that we understand where we get our brushes from, we can choose our brushes from here. We can set our size here, and obviously the more pixels that we have, the bigger the brush. We understand hardness and softness. We also have some other options here that we can look at. And most of these you aren't going to use for basic editing. So we have this fade option here, which on this particular blank document isn't really going to do anything. But we have this hue or jitter button. So you can see here that it actually leaves kind of a neat 3D tunnel looking effect. Pull that back down. We have a scatter slider, and it's going to make our brush scatter randomly. We have a spacing slider, and it's going to space out our brush stroke, making it kind of like a trail of dots. And then we have hardness, and then we have our roundness, and if you watch this angle here, you can see that we're actually flattening our brush out. So you can see how you kind of get like a ribbony effect from that. Most of these settings, like I said, I don't ever use, with the exception of the hardness. And here you have tablet settings. I don't have a tablet. I hear really good things about them. So if you had a tablet, then you could come in here and you could play with your settings. But like I said, I'm not using a tablet for this demonstration. Also, you can change the blending mode of your brush. So if you haven't yet watched the blending mode video tutorial, then I would encourage you to do that so that you can further understand blend modes. So there's one more concept I'm going to talk about here, and it's brush opacity. Now this really is the same thing as layer opacity. So if you understand layer opacity, then you're not going to have a problem trying to understand this. So here is my brush at 100%. Here is my brush at 44%. And here is my brush at 11%. So obviously, the lower that my opacity, the more translucent my brush becomes. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of editing to this photo so that we can put some of these brush things to use here. So I'm just going to come up here and I'm going to grab my actions window, and let's just run an action really quick. Let's grab persnickety. Okay, so we're going to go ahead now, and I'm just going to invert this layer mask, and we are going to paint this back on. So I really like the effect on the water, so I'm going to paint that on the water 100%, and I'm going to use, now see here how I'm using a hard brush, and you see how it's not blending? I need to change my brush settings. I'm going to pull them down to 0%. And now I am able to go through here and paint this on, and my elements is not catching up to me very quickly. So let's just give that a second to load. Yours probably won't do this. I'm running the screen recording program in my background, and it uses up a lot of my memory. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to keep painting this on. You see how that makes a nice, more natural fade with the soft brush, as opposed to such a drastic, hard line. So I'm just going to keep kind of painting this on. And make sure that I get the corners, and I'm going to watch my layer mask as I go. I really like the little girl's skin tone. I think that she has very nice skin in this photo, and I don't want to do too much to jeopardize that for her. I don't want to turn her too pink. I'm just going to kind of come in here and paint this. Paint that one. So let's take a look at that before and after. So there's that before and that after, and it looks like I did already hit her skin. So I'm going to take that back off. So I am going to paint on her skin, but I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to turn down the opacity to about 50%. Then I'm going to paint it on her skin. That way I don't, like I said before, I don't want to turn her too pink. Okay, so now you can see on here my layer mask. It's mostly white, but there's a gray area. That is where I have painted it on, but I didn't paint it on at 100% opacity. I painted it on at 50% opacity. So that would be an example of how you could use the opacity of the brush to make a change to a picture. Otherwise, if I wouldn't have used brush opacity, I could have ran this action twice, and I could have still used my brush to paint on where I wanted to see it, or maybe paint it off the girl and then run the action again and only have it painted on the girl and lower the opacity of the action, but that sounds like so much work. So this brush opacity is so much easier. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. So that pretty much explains what you need to know about brushes. They are really easy to use and they are extremely helpful, and I use them every single time I edit. So it is important that you do understand how they work. And so the three main important things to understand about brushes are size, opacity, and hardness. And once you have those three things down, your editing style will be able to expand drastically, and you will have such a you will have so much more freedom when working with layer masks and so on. So thank you for watching this video tutorial. Happy editing!